The state of Indiana has one of the worst infant mortality rates in the country. That's a problem they should be taking with utmost seriousness. The governor of Indiana says he does take it very seriously, and yet there are serious questions about what might be described as the ideological agenda behind new efforts to address infant mortality in that country, in that state. And here to address that with us now is Laura Huss. Laura is an editorial and research associate with Rewire.com. Rewire covers reproductive issues and other women's health issues. And Laura recently wrote a piece for Rewire entitled Indiana is addressing infant mortality using fake clinics. So first of all, Laura, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Secondly, if you would just give me a sense of what brought this story to your attention, what led you to look into it and write about it.
Yeah, so just one clarity, it's our website is Rewire.news.
I'm sorry. Okay.
That's all right. So yeah, I was doing research on public health and fake clinics, which are also which is used in the title, but they're also known as crisis pregnancy centers or CPCs, so-called. And I found Indiana's press release for what they're describing as this Live app that they developed. And so I started to dig into the app and Indiana's response to their state crisis on infant mortality. And I started to find a list of resources on the site and noticed that some of them were fake clinics. And in seeing these clinics, these are things that we have researched and published on consistently at Rewire. And it was clear that, if these fake clinics are part of these campaigns, instead of what is needed in order to reduce infant mortality and improve birth outcomes, which is access to comprehensive and evidence-based healthcare, then this was something to take a look at.
So if I understand correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong, these fake clinics, these so-called the CPCs, what they're really doing is under cover of providing medical care, they're really slipping into a relationship that should be between a woman and her medical provider in order to attempt to persuade her not to have an abortion. Is that roughly right?
Yeah, fake clinics use a number of tactics in order to advance their agenda, which is largely anti-abortion. And a lot of these tactics take different shapes depending on the clinic and depending on the state. But what's important to understand is that they largely do not provide comprehensive or evidence-based healthcare, oftentimes do not employ medical professionals, and they also receive state and federal funding in order to advance their tactics. At the moment, crisis pregnancy centers are on the national stage with a Supreme Court case currently being decided about them after the state of California enacted their Reproductive Fact Act, which made it so that these unlicensed centers, if they were unlicensed, had to disclose this, that they were not medical facilities, and also had to include contact information in their centers for places where people could access contraception and abortion care services, because they do not provide them and do not refer to them. So that, those are some of the examples of the ways that they promote their agenda. But the important thing that I saw, at least on some of the ones that were mentioned on the app, is also there's often lies told on their website about medical procedures and the care that they provide. For instance, one of the fake clinics that I talk about in the story, their website, it's the Helping Hands Pregnancy Resource Center, their website includes information about how that states falsities about how the morning after pill works. They also claim that there's an association between abortion and the risk of breast cancer for the pregnant person, which is something that has been shown to be false, and leading medical organizations have also are on the record saying so. So yeah, there's a number of tactics that are used, and you're right to say that um, there is misinformation and lies, and they spread this, and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I see, Laura, you know, this is such really important information that you've uncovered. I see three problems. And again, we're talking with Laura Huss of Rewire.news. Three problems. One is, first of all, state resources being used to promote a point of view that has no business being part of public, you know, resources. As far as I'm concerned, people can believe what they want to believe, but using state resources to promote that, one I personally oppose. The second is that they are providing medical misinformation in order to promote their point of view, which is really, really unethical and disturbing and vile, frankly, as far as I'm concerned. And the third is that the women who find themselves directed to these fake clinics are women at a point in their life when they need good, competent medical care, and instead they're receiving sham care, meaning that, for example, I would think a woman might say something over the phone that indicates that would indicate to a trained medical professional that there's a serious problem going on. But because she's not talking to a serious medical professional, that problem may go unrecognized. So I think there's just, and that's just three I can think of. I think it's this wrong in so many ways that it's really, really disturbing.
Yeah, exactly. I think your points are exactly to the issue, and also to the issue related to the infant mortality, which is that, you know, healthcare that's evidence-based and comprehensive is a key aspect in reducing infant mortality and positive and birth outcomes, and improving birth outcomes. And so when this is not provided through these fake clinics, then there's a real problem.
Yeah, because particularly because I would think, and we can talk a little bit about the causes of high infant mortality in Indiana, but I know a little bit about the demographics of Indiana. I would assume that the infant mortality is concentrated among minority populations, low-income populations, and so on. These are the very people who need, you know, if state resources are going to be used to connect people with medical care and medical advice, this could really help reduce the infant mortality rate. But if you're connecting them to sort of pseudo providers who don't really know medicine, you're not, children, literally babies could die as a result, I guess is what I'm saying, right?
Hmm. Yeah, you know, there's been a lot of work for a long time on infant mortality, and to understand sort of what are the significant contributors behind it. And I touch on a few of those in the piece that have been discussed in the last few years in particular, which are high rates of birth defects and preterm births. And a lot of people have identified best practices in order to address these factors, such as reducing elective surgeries before 39 weeks of gestation, or increasing access to prenatal care, reducing incidence of cigarette smoking, encouraging people to space their births by 18 months. And for many of these practices, providing comprehensive family planning and evidence-based reproductive health care is a key aspect of addressing these issues. And so when services are being promoted that don't include comprehensive family planning and evidence-based reproductive health care, you're not addressing the issues at hand that we know are important to target.
So, you know, Indiana, the other piece, Indiana has, even by Republican standards, I think a pretty retrograde Republican Party on on some of these issues. And of course, it's where Mike Pence is from. And Mike Pence, former governor of Indiana, now vice president of the United States. Does he have a role in it? Where does he fit in all this? Was he part of laying the groundwork for this? Is there a Pence connection anywhere here?
Yeah, so this Live app is actually part of a larger infant mortality campaign that was spearheaded by the Indiana State Department of Health and actually started under Mike Pence's tenure in 2013. Um, During that year, Pence identified infant mortality as a key priority for the State Department of Health to focus on. And part of their campaign is it's called the Labor of Love campaign, and it includes a number of programs and resources. And the Live app is just one example of their newest piece of the campaign. Another thing which I address in the article is that the website for the Labor of Love campaign also includes a link to an organization called the American Pregnancy Association that is essentially a conduit for crisis pregnancy centers or these fake clinics as well. So these fake clinics I've seen in and out of various aspects of the campaign. So that was started under Pence's tenure, but in particular to reproductive health and rights in the state of Indiana. Pence has been involved in a long legacy of promoting ideology over evidence in this regard. He signed every anti-choice bill that came across his desk while he was governor, totaling at least 8 pieces of legislation. And these ranged from banning private health coverage for abortion care to forcing people who experience pregnancy losses to hold funerals for their fetuses. Um, and, and when it comes to fake clinics, in 2016, a colleague of mine, Jen Stanley, who's a senior producer at Rewire, published a piece on the fact that Mike Pence was funneling money from Indiana's Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which is the TANF grant in block grant in the state, to a CPC umbrella organization in Indiana. And this wasn't just, obviously this is an issue for funding of fake clinics, but also this was $3.5 million that went towards the promotion of misinformation. And so, Mike Pence's anti-choice record is clear, and when trying to address infant mortality, governing with these anti-choice policies is not in line with the public health evidence.
It's not in line with the public health evidence, and it's imposing your personal views, sometimes I think in a very brutal and creepy, frankly, way, on women who deserve the support of their community and their state. So Laura Huss, thanks for your great reporting on this, and Rewire.news has been addressing Indiana's reproductive rights record for some time now. Again, the article at Rewire is Indiana is addressing infant mortality using fake clinics. So Laura, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.